Welcome, everyone. Hello, my name is Diana Barrero, and I run research at the Global Standards and the Global Standards Mapping Initiative at GBBC. We have run a series of working groups on a number of different topics that are relevant to the blockchain and digital asset space, including this working group at hand on technical standards. And it's been such a pleasure to be joined by Dan Conway from the University of Arkansas and Insights, and Neil Wasserman from GW to discuss the report and landscape that we had put together on technical standards over the course of 2025. And we've been working together already for the past couple of years. We have put together a series of commentaries on the latest trends on standards, and we are just so grateful for your contributions to this work. I will let Dan and Neil now introduce themselves briefly. Please tell us your role and your main area of focus. So Dan, please get us started.
Well, thank you, Diane. It's always an honor to be on the same podcast with you. It means I've made it in life. Neil, it's always good to see you, of course. My role, I'm chair of the U.S. standards body for blockchain. It's under an umbrella organization of Insights. I'm a professor at the University of Arkansas. We are a supply chain school, so we're active in blockchain. I also lead some AI things, cybersecurity, and quantum computing here. And then I am Chief Blockchain and Ecosystem Standards Officer for Core Inside, where we are building private market infrastructure on Hyperledger. Wow. All yours, Neil.
Neil, please introduce yourself.
Sure. This is Neil Wasserman. Pleasure to be in this illustrious group. I've enjoyed so much working with Dan and Diana and the crew at GBBC. And the Technical Standards Working Group is a bit of an overview function for standards, and we link into the other working groups at GBBC. And interoperability in terms of intellectual interoperability is kind of a theme. I'm associated with George Washington University. I taught the first blockchain course in the computer science department, and I'm affiliated also with the Elliott School of International Relations in the science policy area. And my tentacles spread in a few different directions. I'm interested in AI ethics and standards and the value of maintaining stability in the technical environment and predictability in terms of what people can expect in terms of the evolution of technology. And I'll probably refer to that later in the discussion.
So here we have two true experts on standards and research and developments in innovation that we are so honored to have us join and work with over the course of many important initiatives. Together, we have developed a comprehensive technical standards landscape for blockchain and digital assets, where we have organized, categorized, and analyzed over 100 international standards bodies, their outputs in terms of standards and related work, and their roles shaping more interoperable, secure, and scalable infrastructure for digital asset markets. We also put together an analysis on the importance of technical standards for the blockchain and digital asset space in specific. This addresses institutional and broader commercial needs for interoperability, risk management, integration with regulated systems, and product-grade engineering certainty, making sure that these innovations work with common rules of the game and common understandings, which are so important. Our work includes not only structured reference of standards and standard setting organization, but we also provide an expert commentary on why standards matter for governance, product development, and institutional adoption, where we've highlighted the journey and the steps that it takes to develop a standard from the perspective of global, international, globally recognized standards bodies, and also the steps on the journey that it takes for organizations, startups, institutions to comply with standards. And it's not always as straightforward as we think. So read our report and you will have more insights. But let's start our conversation with focusing on the role of trust and standards. And I'll start with Neil here, because trust is such an important topic for you. What is the role of standards as a component in building trust for a system?
Well, let me just start off by referring to the fact that technologies are not implemented instantaneously and then everything suddenly changes. If even with respect to the internet, which had its origin in the late 1970s and 80s, it took a good 25 years for the internet to have the transformative effect that it's had. And blockchain, while it was born out of the 2008 financial crisis to create a trustful environment that didn't depend upon what appeared to be an unstable financial system, it may take a while before blockchain is competitive with the kinds of transaction environments that we've come to trust over decades. And the question is, how do we create that level of trust? How do we use standards and a regulatory environment that creates the same kind of trustful system in the blockchain universe that we have in the financial transaction universe that's more traditional and some might say kind of stodgy. You know, we want blockchain offers the possibility of a trustful environment that is universal, that goes across borders and creates an opportunity for implementing software-based transactions that have the same level of trust as the financial system that has governed financial transactions for many years. And standards and regulation should be regarded as blockchain's best friend, because oversight creates trust and trust creates value. On the other hand, lack of trust comes at a high cost, and mistrust can cascade as it did in the 2008 financial crisis. So I would just pose the question, you know, how can we use standards and other mechanisms of creating stability in the blockchain environment to create that level of trust and stability where a future is predictable. I mean, the financial universe depends upon predictability in the environment. We can't have interest rates fluctuating from 3% to 14% and asset monetization fluctuating, you know, by 50%, you know, over a 6-month period. I mean, that creates instability, which makes business investment decisions very difficult, if not impossible. So exactly. I'll leave it there.
And as many say that the value of blockchain technology at its greatest would be to increase trust, right? So building on this question, for Neil to continue unpacking, what is the role of regulatory clarity in relation to standards development?
Well, you know, the financial environment has depended upon regulation to create confidence in the ability of transactions to execute according to the contractual specifications of the parties to that transaction. And the regulatory bodies have played an important role in creating that level of trust, that is, knowing who the customer is, being able to adjudicate disputed transactions according to specified methods, confidence that transactions will execute according to the rules and contractual specifications of the parties involved. So the regulatory bodies that have overseen the financial environment have created a kind of stability and confidence in that financial environment, so that parties can have confidence that the transactions will be executed in a way that they expect. And the regulatory environment also creates stability over time. That is, can we have confidence that asset values will persist without undue fluctuations? Can investments in any kind of asset have stability in terms of ownership and value over time? And that kind of environment engenders trust in terms of the parties to transactions and the ability to invest with some level of confidence that the investments will have predictable, if not certain, results.
That is true. These are such important considerations. And moving to Dan, what to you is the importance of trust in relation to standards? How do you define it? And how can we really get there?
So in 30 words or less, I will add on to Neil's communication. Blockchain comes into this from left field, right? So it's not something that was spawned off of existing governance and existing standards and so on. So it was kind of created by people who had a green field out there and could build on their own. The selling point of blockchain has always been that you're disintermediating traditional forms of trust, banks, banking trust, government, and so on, and you're replacing them with trusting a network and cryptographic protocols. Bitcoin itself is a protocol worth over $1 trillion, it seems, right now. So when we look at what Dale Christie would describe as a coopetition, right? So you have cooperation and you have competition. The cooperation part is really the standards part. And the infrastructure of standards is the infrastructure needed for innovation. So if we don't have good clarity, this is what they're debating right now, if we don't have good regulation, then we're not going to have a very stable infrastructure on which to build innovation. Now, we've got a lot of sort of growing pains associated with this. I mean, we've adopted vocabulary that isn't even very accurate. So when we talk about trustless systems, the Chinese delegation would say, well, that means you can't trust them. And well, technically that's what it's supposed to mean, but really the way we mean to use the term is we're no longer trusting the traditional central authorities, we're now trusting the network. Or when people say zero trust systems and so on, well, that doesn't mean there's zero knowledge systems. That doesn't mean that there's no knowledge to it. And in a sense, a smart contract isn't smart or a contract. So we are struggling a little bit trying to get standards done in a way that is starting from scratch. I would say that where we're evolving with this, and I've worked on this for a number of years, but where we're evolving on this is that a blockchain maintains an infrastructure of trust, but the but verify associated with trust is probably going to be a role for AI to play. But trust itself, yeah, this is the confidence that we have that the information is true. And this is something we'll be struggling with in 100 years.
Couldn't have said it better than both of you. So here, through trust, we are connecting standards to governance and regulation. And our analysis hasn't just listed standards, it's also useful to interpret how technical criteria relate to broader outcomes in terms of governance, whether it's security, resilience, cross-chain trust, identity verification, auditability, etc. And the aim is to help institutional teams bridge technical standards with regulatory expectations and risk frameworks, as well as startups and basically all stakeholders in the game, because when standards create trust, everybody wins. So moving to a next important point, which is interoperability as part of what standards provide. I'll go back to Dan. When it comes to integration and interoperability, what are the challenges for standards development?
So I was, this to me is the most important part of, and probably why I got involved in the US standards at all. The early days of Bitcoin, when there were only 24 of us or so that were involved in it, they would often say things like, well, there's only 21 million Bitcoin ever. And I'm like, well, this is kind of digital, so I can spin up Bitcoin 2 or Bitcoin 3 or Bitcoin 4, and now I've got 84 million tokens. And they said, well, don't do that. Right? We don't want you to do that. I said, well, I'm going to do that, or I'm going to do something similar, and somehow these tokens will have to interoperate, and these blockchains will have to interoperate. And how do we do that? And of course, they didn't want any of that to occur. If we look at kind of what's evolved in the last 15 years, it's been quite a ride. It's been really, met some brilliant people, including Diana here. And if you sort of take these challenges and look at blockchain to blockchain challenges, you have blockchain to enterprise system challenges, integration. You have blockchain to digital ecosystem, Web3 payment systems sort of challenges. So blockchain can appear within an ecosystem playing several roles. And each of these roles has to integrate with other systems and other use cases. As far as challenges go, I think we see a lot of the same challenges that we did with database interoperability, with ODBC, ways to communicate between databases and applications. Certainly cybersecurity is the more we open up our risk vectors, we have to pay attention to that. I think one of the bigger challenges that we've kind of ignored so far is the post-quantum computing concern that people have, because the blockchain uses a lot of the same cryptographic protocols as elliptical curve encryption and things that are based on factoring large semi-prime numbers. We're facing the same problems that other information systems people are facing with regard to quantum. One of the big challenges of interoperability is that you've got compliance, probably 21 different, it's at least the 21 that are worth pursuing, different compliance structures. And how do you take something off one blockchain or integrate things or atomic swap between blockchains and maintain some degree of compliance between them? So I think compliance is a real big problem. And then what we're kind of seeing right now, at least at the international standards level, is that there's a bit of a battle going on. And maybe this has been going on for a long time and I'm just becoming aware of it. But there's a philosophical problem that we're facing right now, and that typically the US standards approach is that we are trying to build a platform of innovation. And we benefit by all the innovations that come from that platform. Like Neil described, it's a slow process with the internet and so on. But the ultimate goal for us is to all agree to what this should look like. And we want it to induce and incubate innovation on top of it. There are other competitors in philosophy that want to make sure that whatever standards they propose have a governance structure that gives centralized control back. So the governance can determine who gets to play and under what conditions people can participate in. We don't necessarily in the United States want innovation to have that kind of a governance oversight. We're trying to figure out what oversight looks like, but we don't want sort of it to be a big thumb, to decide who gets to play and who doesn't get to play. So we're seeing lots of challenges. Interoperability is hard. The Cosmos approach is that, hey, we'll start with interoperability, the IBC protocol, and then you build on top of it. And the international standard, which we'll discuss in Paris in June, will probably have that kind of architecture to it. But interoperability can have a lot of different flavors in how we integrate it with existing systems, how we integrate it with compliance systems. Those are all kind of hard, as they have been when internet protocols came out. We had TCP/IP, we had the ability to communicate. We had gateway protocols that could do it more efficiently, but we still had to struggle through how we interoperate with systems that are compliance oriented, privacy oriented, and just backup systems, business continuity, and all those things all have to be under consideration. But I'd say making things compliant is a real challenge. And we've been kind of working on it for years, and it's still a real challenge.
We would hope it goes hand in hand, but there's a lot more complexity I'm understanding, and also education needed for regulators. Kind of moving on to opportunities, if we are to get there and standards may think of a world in the future where standards do enable interoperability, what interesting and impactful business models and opportunity can this unlock?
Well, I'm involved in a lot of these things. It's a really, really interesting time, and frankly, young people love this space, whereas digital transformation often means laying off people. Doing innovation that involves blockchain, AI, quantum computing, and things like that, it really inspires young people to participate. And it's because of the global nature of this, it's no longer restricted to Massachusetts and California to do the innovation. But I'm involved in a number of these things. So some of them with Core Inside, we're using digital twin technology because the movement is tokenization of everything. And that's being driven by BlackRock and being driven by lots of things. So it's not just a tokenization representing a cryptocurrency or a stable coin, but the tokenization of everything. From my pen will be on a blockchain, and I can sell a fraction of it to Neil, since he lives in Washington, D.C. and has these super big salaries and stuff that they have out there. He could buy a fraction of my pen from me. But what we're doing is we're setting up digital twins of this tokenization of everything, whereas the digital twin can deal with compliance, anti-money laundering, know your customer, Bank Secrecy Act compliance, and so on. But it can also do AI stuff that can maybe go through and look at the contract. Maybe the result of a contract is a switch in ownership of tokens, but it can go through and look at the contract the way ChatGPT might look at a contract and summarize it for you, or give you some advice, or tell you not to accept that terms and conditions of that contract. So a digital twin of if folks are going to tokenize everything, they probably don't want to be experts in compliance in 21 countries across the world. So that's a good use of a digital twin, which would be tokenized in a private permissioned blockchain that would understand the guardrails of risk as well as compliance. Excuse me. I have another group called Solve, and that merges out of blockchain people as well, the former BITA people who are working, and they're looking at AI risk compliance and how do you get AI to behave well. That's certainly a topic of conversation going on everywhere, but AI has learned to mislead through changing its own log files and so on. So if you really do want AI to follow guardrails, as far as I know, blockchain is the only solution for putting risk management that AI cannot overcome, at least that I haven't seen it overcome. So we're looking at that. Sizemora is a project that's looking at streaming intelligence. So intelligence over overlay of the internet. So abstracting out the internet technology itself and just doing intelligence that moves around how do you put guardrails on this form of intelligence? How do you know what's worthy of messaging between forms of intelligence? So if you have agentic AI doing things, how do you keep from bad actors coming in and misleading your AI? Well, you do publish subscriber messaging on blockchain. So the blockchain becomes the version of truth for that. Anyway, I've probably got 10 other examples of things that are, I advise a number of companies in this space, and it's absolutely fascinating what's going on. The world's changing quite a bit.
Yeah, this is wonderful. No, thank you for sharing all these experiences and the story of working, developing standards and their importance, because interoperability is another key factor, as is trust. Going back to Neil to connect the dots. What are your comments from your perspective on the importance of trust? What are your thoughts on the importance of interoperability, its challenges, and opportunities that we can unlock through standards?
Yeah, Dan is involved in so many different interesting projects. I'm focusing in some ways on the intersection of AI risk and blockchain, and I think there are a lot of opportunities at that interface. Right now, it's too easy to create an isolated blockchain environment with no oversight, and that's one of the risks that make blockchain less competitive in some ways than the traditional financial environment. That is, it's easy to carry out a transaction from dollars to euros or other currencies. I mean, there are international mechanisms that make that happen in a rather liquid way. In the blockchain environment, we don't yet have that kind of substrate for supporting interoperability. But one of the major risks in the AI world, for example, is the ability to create agents that could create mischief. You know, the agent that induces your grandmother to turn over her financial assets to some unknown cryptocurrency-based asset sink.
When there's no accountability, it can be pretty scary.
There's no accountability, no oversight. And one of the opportunities for blockchain is the ability to validate what happens in the AI world. So blockchain is very good at provenance, at attaching a digital marker to an entity which is then verifiable on within the blockchain world. In the AI world, we have virtually no control over what the LLM can produce, what the agent that's produced by the LLM, how it may act in the digital world. So we need better mechanisms for attaching identity to these agents, if you want to think of it in that way. And blockchain is a very good mechanism for attaching provenance and identity in the digital universe. So I think there are a number of challenges that are rapidly accelerating because of the growth of AI, and blockchain offers an opportunity to manage some of these challenges, I think, in concert with regulatory action, which needs to become a little bit more active in terms of assessing the risks and controlling the risks.
Absolutely.
And all of this, I think, would engender increased trust in the environment, both in the AI world and in the transaction environment that blockchain is intended to support.
Wonderful. So we're seeing how standards establish a foundation for scale with market-grade interoperability in a way that is trustworthy and accountable, right? Technical standards set baseline criteria to cover protocols, interfaces, data formats, security models, quality benchmarks, etc., all of which are necessary for disparate blockchain systems, custody solutions, service layers, and everything involved to work together as we point towards scale, enterprise level, and institutionalization. So as we talk through the future of technology, the future of innovation, of which blockchain will be a part in convergence with other emerging technologies like AI in the context of standards, for Dan and Neil, as we see a rise in AI innovations, for example, how they relate to blockchain technology, as you already mentioned, by providing some sort of governance framework or trust layer. Where do you see standards going, briefly? And let's start with Neil.
Well, in the just starting from the area that scares me most, that is the AI universe of agentic production. I think of the AI world in terms of like a car factory. So the car factory is like the LLM, and the car is like the agent. So um, the car factory is subject to some type of regulation, working conditions. The design of the car is subject to some type of regulation, that is, design requirements for safety and operability of the car. When the car is on the road, it is subject to certain restrictions in terms of speed limits and how the car can behave, and there's an enforcement mechanism, the speed camera or the policeman that make sure that drunk drivers don't do too much damage. And so we need this regulatory regime at multiple levels in the AI world, and the only way to actually execute that is to have an environment like blockchain that can certify in a interoperable, universally accessible way which products of the AI world are safe and are operating in a safe way. So what I hope happens is that there's a collaboration between the AI world and the blockchain world to enable the technologies that will allow for appropriate regulation and safety in terms of the operation of these potentially dangerous products. I mean, you don't want AI to create bioweapons, to create financial fraud instruments, to create attacks on privacy. I mean, there are many risks that are associated with this rapidly evolving technology, and I think just the only way to address these concerns is to create a technology-based form of observation and regulation of how these technologies like AI are in fact used. And blockchain can play a critical role in doing that. But in order for that to happen, we need standards and trust in the blockchain universe that is universal across the blockchain world, and not just you can't have standards that pertain just to Bitcoin or just to one isolated area of blockchain. You have to have universality in the way that standards are applied.
Right. That's so important. Thank you, Neil. And moving to Dan, we still have a little bit of time here. As
Okay.
we are seeing such a rise in AI innovations and a pressure to build, and we're also seeing the opportunity of blockchain to provide a layer of trust for AI innovations, what do you see the future of standards looks like?
It looks good. The future looks good.
We
I
need
would
it.
say at both the national and international level, a lot of the people who began the blockchain standards effort have kind of moved all into AI now. A lot of them originated with cybersecurity, and that was my path into blockchain itself back in 2010. But a lot of them have moved out of blockchain and into AI, and now there's some movement from AI into quantum computing. So what we're seeing at standards level is very similar to what I see with Ford Motor, Walmart, or a number of companies that I interact with, is that these things are becoming integrated together. But blockchain is going to play multiple roles within a system. I jotted down four that I've been involved with. One was Jim Regner's Vertex, where he's doing proof of entanglement as a consensus mechanism. So if entanglement is broken, if observation occurs and the Copenhagen definition of collapse occurs, then you'll know that the blockchain is compromised. So he's combining blockchain and quantum with that. I've got a group called Jump Partners that is doing trying to prevent scams against the elderly. And some of the customers in that effort want evidence, because if they get scammed, the average scam is a lot. It's over $60,000. So it's a lot for people on fixed incomes who don't have an opportunity to work another 30 years to make it up. But what they'd like is to have the evidence of the scam put onto a blockchain and have the courts accept that as immutable evidence. There's a little bit of effort right now is to put things on blockchain, kind of the way we harvest now, decrypt later. We're harvesting now onto a blockchain, hoping that we can regulate later and call it legal evidence that can be used in court. There's a lot of interest right now in the X402 Coinbase protocols for payment systems. Web3, all Web3 stuff is likely going to move in that direction. So there's some effort at X402 that they believe is extending an HTTP type of protocol, but extending it that can become a broader sort of payment systems protocol. It's already got a big installed base. I think when Jim Geddes wrote up HTTP, he put it in not knowing that it was going to be a sort of get a lot of attention later on. But extending the 402 error, remember 403 forbidden, 404 file not found, and all that. So 402 is a payment required. So you're asking for something as an internet source. It may be an agentic AI call or something like that, but the payment response comes back in a 402, and so you have to send some crypto off to Polygon or USDC or something like that. And when the blockchain verifies that, then the asset becomes available. So all Web3 stuff is going to have, particularly Web3 agentic sort of systems that are going to require payments or micropayments. All that will have blockchain as underlying. I think the next million Bitcoin addresses will all be created by agents rather than human beings. And I think we're going to see an abundance of sort of micropayments by agents and agent-agent communication or multi-context types of communication. One other standard that I'll probably be introducing myself is there's a group, CALX, C-A-L-X. It's got a former Google executive on it, John Ryan, what we're trying to do is look at how to change the economy so that when you have these, there's asymmetry going on where you privatize the profits and socialize the risks. And we often, in those situations, you think of microplastics or dangers of people breathing in chemicals, cleaning people who are usually lower income, have terrible lung problems later on. And who pays the cost of that? Society generally does. You socialize the costs and privatize the profits of those things. The problem with those sorts of models is the information integrity. People just fight. They argue about it. Climate's a good example about it. But if you can use a blockchain to maintain data integrity maturity. So you can start with, well, this data is from Reddit or Twitter, right? It's what's driving AI. It has some value to it, but then work your way up. It's blockchain verified. It's human verified. It's a consensus sort of data. All that can be put on a blockchain. So in problems where you really do want accurate data and data that everybody agrees upon, I don't know of another mechanism to get there with except blockchain. So I think that data integrity and maturity of data integrity is a sort of a standard that we would like to see propagated. Where are standards going? I'd say the people driving them right now are trying to integrate. Interoperability is, to me, always going to be the most important one. But I'd say it's moving toward quantum systems, zero trust. Everything will be or zero knowledge. Everything will be zero knowledge. But all the standards people, the people that really understand standards processes and how to get things done and form alliances and all that, they're all moving into AI, integrating AI with blockchain, and eventually they'll also move into quantum and then integrate all of these things together. So it's a bright future. There's going to be disruptions as these things play out. But I think it's inevitable. And as Neil said, we have to do it right. But I think blockchain's got a really important role to play in doing it right and maintaining a record in evidentiary issues. So love to hear more from you, Diana, because you are in touch with
these
billion things going on.
These examples of where it's getting real today, we are already in the future that we've envisioned, and it's fascinating to hear about. I want to say that as a group with you two and with the working group, we've observed how standards for overall innovations can reduce operational and integration risks, and otherwise how the absence of unified technical standards and the integration complexity can increase with a lack of standards, as well as operational risks with things that we've seen like inconsistent messaging formats or divergent security assumptions or fragmented custody interfaces that eventually cause problems for the ultimate users and consumers, and it's not good for the overall common good if we're aiming toward that through standards. So that it's been a fascinating journey by mapping standards development across global, regional, and regulatory affiliated bodies, how our work and our landscape has hopefully become a tool to help engineering, risk, and compliance teams to help them anticipate and align implementations ahead of broader adoption, as many of you alluded to over the course of the working group. We've also observed how standards can inform product strategy and architecture decisions to make sure, again, that a technology and an innovation can work and work in the right way, and how institutional product teams can hopefully benefit from this clarity on which standards are emerging or mature, and as they mature, to give clarity on which bodies are influential in which areas, like tokenization or identity protocols or interoperability of different ledgers, and questions on how to position product for future-proof compliance and ecosystem interoperability, which are really, really key. There's many factors to consider. And we're going to have to move on now to a conclusion to conclude our conversation. Thank you so much. I want to end it with a key takeaway from Dan and Neil. If you can provide me with ideally one word, but I will accept one short sentence from each. What will be the greatest impact of standards on emerging technology, especially as it relates to growth, scale, enterprise, institutionalization? As these technologies scale and grow and we aim toward mass adoption for all users all over the world, what will be the greatest impact of technical standards? One word or one brief sentence, Max.
All right, Diana, let me add just two concepts. One is what I would call epistemic security, that is confidence in the shared knowledge that defines what we based our trust on. Identity and validity of transactions and trust in an agent, for example, in the AI world. And the other theme, I think, is stability of the future evolution of the system. So confidence in how the system will evolve, will behave, and stability over time in how the system behaves with respect to its participants and the transactions between participants.
Great points. Dan,
I should just
bring us
say,
to a
no, I
close.
can't. I can't possibly do
You're
this all the time.
professors. You like to talk and deliberate and give us all the
That's
details,
true.
but it's
I
wonderful.
talk for a living. I think my mental model remains that standards are the architecture of innovation, and if we do want an innovation economy, we need to build it on a firm architecture. So I hope we can get better participation in the standards effort. It doesn't pay anything. Most of us who do it spend 15, 20 hours a week as a volunteer. I do hope that people can see the value in having a stable infrastructure for innovation, because I do think that's one of the values, one of the key features that the world can use to improve human experience.
Well, we, at least myself, to speak for myself included, are so grateful for all of your incredible and impressive contributions to the space. I'm excited to say that GBBC has been accepted as a Category A liaison at the ISO, International Organization for Standards, Technical Committee on Blockchain and Distributed Ledgers. And much of the work that we've built on now together on technical standards will be, we will look to integrate it within ISO different activities. And just really looking forward to the future ahead and building on this incredible body of work. Thank you so much.
Thank you for allowing us to participate.
Yeah, thanks for everything. It's been great working with Neil and you.
Likewise.